This video is looking at the nature and variety of living organisms. Now, living organisms have common features which define them as being alive. You may be able to think of some non-living items that possess some of these features, but none of those non-living items possess all of them. For example, you might say a car. It can move, but it can't reproduce. These common traits are movement. Everything's able to move, even if that's just internally within a cell. Respiration. All living things release energy from food by the process of respiration. Sensitivity. All living things are able to sense and respond to their surroundings. Homeostasis. That means that all living things control, to some extent, their internal conditions. Growth. Well, all grow and develop. Development is part of growth. Reproduction. All reproduce to produce offspring which are similar to themselves. Excretion. All excrete waste products from their cells. Nutrition. All require food. Well, so far, so straightforward. And you can remember these as, who is this lady here? She is Mrs. H. Gren. Well, that is an acronym for those life functions. So, that is what life is. And there is a wide variety of living organisms, and they fall into these categories: animals, plants, fungi, protoctists, and bacteria. Viruses are generally tagged onto this, although I think you'll agree probably that they aren't living themselves. Plants, the plant kingdom. All plants are multicellular. They are made out of many cells. They contain chloroplasts. They carry out photosynthesis. Inside those chloroplasts is chlorophyll. Those chloroplasts would be called organelles, that is, small organs within a cell. They have cell walls, and those cell walls are made out of cellulose. Cellulose is a type of carbohydrate. They store carbohydrates as starch or sucrose, much more commonly starch, but sucrose also. Starch, well, if you eat a potato, you're eating a lot of starch. Sucrose, they don't really store carbohydrates as sucrose very often, but some do. For example, sugarcane. And examples of flowering plants. Now, these are all learning outcomes from your board, so you need to know some examples, such as maize and beans and peas. This is a pretty typical plant cell. This is a cell you'd find in a leaf. How do we know we'd find it in a leaf? Well, it's got chloroplasts here, and you find chloroplasts largely in leaves. Also, you'll find them in the stem. That's why some stems are green, but you won't find them in a root. It's got a nucleus. Here it is. Here's our nucleus down here. Now, the nucleus stores the genetic information. It stores the DNA, and it acts as the control center of the cell, the control and information center of the cell. It has this large central vacuole. That large central vacuole stores the cell sap, and as long as the plant cell has got plenty of water in it, this presses outwards. It's so full, it presses outwards like a very full hot water bottle, and that makes the cell rigid. It makes the cell rigid because around the outside of the cell there is this cellulose cell wall, and this cellulose cell wall resists the expansion of a really large full vacuole, and that is what gives us what's called turgor pressure. Just located inside the cell wall is the cell membrane. Just inside it there. You can never actually see a cell membrane under a microscope. They're far, far too small. You can sometimes see where a cell ends, and you have to assume that there's a membrane there. And then there's the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is where the chemical reactions of the cell take place. You've also got these little starch granules here, and they are just a little store of carbohydrate. Animals, right. What about animals? Well, also multicellular organisms. They don't contain chloroplasts, are not able to photosynthesize. You know this. You know that you're not green and that when you go out in the sun you don't make your own food, so that's pretty easy. They don't have cell walls. We do not have cell walls. If we did have cell walls, we would find moving much more difficult. Nervous coordination. It says here usually have nervous coordination. Every animal phylum other than sponges have nervous coordination. That means we have nerves firing from one part of our bodies to another. That's true for insects. It's true for mollusks. It's true for all sorts of animals. Able to move from one place to another at different stages of life. I'm not sure you'd say that coral moves very much, but in a larval stage it does move around. And we as animals, and other animals also, store carbohydrate not as starch, but as something which is very, very, very similar to starch, called glycogen. Examples, we need to know examples. So mammals, we're mammals. We have hair, we produce milk to feed our young, we are mammals, we are warm-blooded as well. But also insects, houseflies, mosquitoes. Oh, that's a housefly. It looks pretty horrible. Actually, I think it doesn't look horrible at all. I think it looks remarkably cool. Let's just have a look. Those are its mouth parts there. It vomits up through those mouth parts loads of enzymes onto food, and then it slurps up all the stuff it digests. Then you have these amazing compound eyes there, and all these bristles here. These are not hairs as we have hairs. These are bristles, and they're extremely sensory. So if one of them gets tweaked, it sets off an action potential, a nerve impulse in a nerve, and that causes the fly to sense what's going on. This is a standard animal cell. Much simpler than a plant cell, or so we think at GCSE level. Let's not go into AS level detail yet, eh? We have the nucleus at the center, serving exactly the same function as it did in a plant cell. It is the information and control center of the cell, storing the DNA, storing that genetic information. It has glycogen granules. You'll remember there were starch granules in the plant cell. Well, there are glycogen granules in animal cells, our way of storing carbohydrate. Then cytoplasm, that is where all the chemical reactions take place, such as respiration. And then the cell membrane around the outside. Now the cell membrane, the function of that is to control what goes in and out of a cell. The cell membrane itself gives really very little structure to the cell. It kind of holds the cell together, yes it does, but it won't resist much expansion, and if that cell expands too much, then it will burst. Fungi. Now, key to fungi is to remember that they are not able to carry out photosynthesis. They're not able to carry out photosynthesis. Sorry, a little typo on the PowerPoint there. They don't have chloroplasts. They don't have chlorophyll. Even if they're green, and I don't know many fungi which are green. Even if they're green, it's not because they have chlorophyll in them. And you'll know this. Fungi grow in dark, damp places. They can grow in light places as well, but they don't need light to grow. They feed differently, and we'll get onto that just in a moment. Their bodies are organized into thread-like hyphae. I'll show you a picture of that in a bit, making up a mycelium, and the hyphae contain many nuclei. Some are single-celled, so I've just described a multicellular fungus, but some are single-celled, such as yeast. They have cell walls, but they're not made out of cellulose, they're made out of chitin. And they feed by secreting digestive enzymes onto the food that they're growing through. Now, those enzymes then digest that food, and then they absorb those products, those organic products of digestion, and that is called saprotrophic nutrition. That's a key syllabus word. Saprotrophic nutrition. Store carbohydrates as glycogen, as animals do, not as starch. And you need to know two examples. Mucor, that is a multicellular fungus with a typical hyphal structure, and yeast, which is single-celled. This is a hyphal structure. So these are hyphae. Here we go. That is a hypha there. It's one cell thick, and you can see it's branching off in all sorts of directions there. These here are kind of show where the cells stop and begin, but actually the cytoplasm is continuous between these. So the cytoplasm can freely flow between cells. And there are many nuclei along here. This is mucor, and these are hyphae growing through a rotting peach. Yuck. And here comes yeast. Oh, yeast is coming up later, not now. This is it in diagrammatic form, and these are hyphae. This is the cross wall there that we were talking about. And what they do is they secrete digestive enzymes. Those digestive enzymes digest anything they're sitting in, and then they absorb the food products from this that they're growing through there. This is a mycelium made out of many hyphae. Cell wall made of chitin. These are yeast, the long-awaited yeast. Here we go. They are single-celled. They've got a nucleus in the middle. They are eukaryotic. Eukaryotic is a word which means contains a nucleus. Animals are eukaryotic, plants are eukaryotic, and fungi are eukaryotic. They have a cell wall containing chitin. You've got a cell membrane just inside that. Cytoplasm just doing the same function as cytoplasm in animal and plant cells, where the chemical reactions take place, including respiration, and a nucleus. And note, no chloroplasts. Protoctists. Now, protoctists are a funny old kingdom. They are single-celled, sometimes called protoctistans, and they are eukaryotic. Now, that means they have a nucleus. Now, some have features which make them look like animal cells. So, an amoeba, that looks pretty much like an animal cell. It lives in pond water, and it does kind of animal cell type things. But others have chloroplasts, look more like plant cells, such as chlorella. Plasmodium is one of those you'd say it would look more like an animal cell, and it's also pathogenic. It causes malaria. Pathogenic means causes harm, and Plasmodium causes harm by giving you malaria. Pretty nasty stuff. And they have cell membranes, cytoplasm, and a nucleus, and that's about all you can say for protoctistans, because they are very, very varied. So here we have chlorella at the top of the screen here. You can see that this here is one cell, and it is dividing to produce a second cell here. This is a process called mitosis, but for now let's just think about it as cell division. That's how cells reproduce, they divide. That's how your cells reproduce. And inside the chlorella we have chloroplasts. You can see each individual chloroplast rather beautifully. I can't make out the nucleus in here, but there will be a nucleus in here. And there will be a nucleus in here as well. Down here we have an amoeba. This is more like an animal cell. It is a protoctistan. It is not an animal cell. It's just a bit like an animal cell. And it moves around by stretching out these, well, they're false feet, pseudopodia, as they're called. And what it does is it feeds itself by chasing stuff around the pond. It just chases it around, engulfs it into its body, and then, once it's engulfed it, it digests it and uses that as food. Bacteria. Bacteria are very, very small. They're microscopic, single-celled organisms, and they have a fairly simple cell structure. They have a cell wall. Don't worry about what a bacteria cell wall is made out of. It's not made out of chitin. It's not made out of cellulose. Hey, why not? It's made out of peptidoglycan. There you go. It's got a cell membrane, and it's got cytoplasm. It doesn't have a nucleus. Bacteria do not have a nucleus, but they do contain a circular chromosome of DNA. Now, these circular chromosomes of DNA, they're nothing like the size of one of your or my chromosomes. Our chromosomes are much bigger, but nonetheless, this is called a large circular chromosome. But it has also many smaller hoops of DNA called plasmids. Some bacteria can photosynthesize. Most feed off other living or dead organisms. Lactobacillus bulgaricus, that is an example. That's an example that your board want you to know about because we use it to make yogurt. If you get live culture yogurt, it will contain Lactobacillus bulgaricus. And then there's pneumococcus. Pneumococcus causes pneumonia. It's pretty nasty. Here are some examples of different shapes of bacteria. These are rod shapes. These are shapes like spheres. And this is an example of bacteria which photosynthesize. They've got structures inside them which look like chloroplasts. They're not true chloroplasts, but they kind of look like them. They certainly have chlorophyll in them. And these photosynthesizing bacteria are called blue-green algae. They're not true algae. True algae, such as seaweed, are Protoctists. But these are blue-green algae, and they are bacteria. They don't have a nucleus, and they don't have true chloroplasts, so they do have chlorophyll. Yuck. This is... Whoop, let's go back to it. This is inside your mouth. These larger structures here, these large structures, those are cheek cells. Those are your cheek cells. You can see they're animal cells. They've got a nucleus in there somewhere or other. And these are all the bacteria you will find in your mouth. First of all, you can see how small they are in comparison to one of your huge cells. But also you can see how grotty the human mouth really is. Yuck. Oh, there's a scale bar here. 10 micrometers. 10 micrometers. 1 micrometer is a 1,000th of a millimeter. 1 micrometer is a 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So 10 micrometers is 10 thousandths of a millimeter, or 1/100th of a millimeter. That's your scale bar there, to give you an idea of how big these are. Here we go. This is a stylized diagram of a bacterium, and this is that circular chromosome we were talking about. Round the outside, we've got a cell wall there. We've got plasmids on the inside here. Actually, we've got a mucus coat out here, sometimes called, is outside the cell wall, sometimes called a slime capsule. Sounds charming. And we have a flagellum here, or several flagella, and just inside the cell wall, a cell membrane. Cytoplasm inside, that cytoplasm, just as it would be in an animal cell, plant cell, protoctist cell, fungal cell. And that's where chemical reactions take place. We've heard that record before. Now we get on to viruses. Now, what can we say about these? Well, they're extremely small, much smaller even than bacteria. They are parasitic and only reproduce inside living cells. You have viruses which infect everything. You can find an example which will infect anything you think of. Including bacteria. There are plenty of viruses which infect bacteria. Wide variety of shapes and sizes. And they don't really have a cellular structure. Very simply, they're just a bit of DNA or a bit of RNA, which is very similar to DNA, wrapped up in protein. That's it. Examples: tobacco mosaic virus. That is a big pathogen which causes extensive economic damage to tobacco farmers. You can debate whether or not that's a good or bad thing. And it does it by preventing the formation of chloroplasts, so they can't photosynthesize. Flu, caused by the influenza virus, and HIV, which is the virus that causes AIDS. This, we'll just go back. This is the HN51 virus injecting its DNA. This is the virus particle here. That's the protein coat of it. And here it is injecting its DNA into a human lung cell. It's an image taken with an electron microscope, a scanning electron microscope. The color is false. Any color you see on an electron micrograph is false, but it shows the image rather spectacularly. So this human cell here, this human lung cell, is being hijacked by this viral cell, which is just injecting its DNA inside, and that DNA is a message. It's a very simple message, and that message is, copy me. Copy me. And the human cell, what does it do? It says, oh, I've got this message. It says, copy me. Oh, okay then. And our cells, they're totally stupid. They're totally fooled. And they just make hundreds upon hundreds of copies of this virus. And then when they're full to bursting with viral particles, they burst, releasing all these virus particles that they have made back into the body. And then they go and infect other human cells. And then they get copied again. So that's how viruses get passed around. This is a computer mock-up of HIV. This is the protein coat inside, these kind of globules here. And this is our nucleic acid inside. In the case of HIV, that's RNA rather than DNA. But chemically, it's very, very similar. Now, HIV has done something a bit clever. It has surrounded itself with the membrane of a human cell. By doing that, it can hide from our immune system. It's quite a clever thing to do. Well done, HIV. Stylized diagram. This is one for your notes. We've got protein coat around the outside. With the spikes, these are the bits. You saw the spike on the H5N1 virus, and this is where it recognizes a host cell and is able to lock onto it to inject in its genetic material, either DNA or RNA, but only a single strand of it. Can we really say that viruses are alive? Well, do they do the Mrs. H. Gren functions? No, they don't. Other cells do it. They take over other cells. But on their own, no, they don't. So I don't think we can say that. Pathogens. Pathogens is a word you need to know about. Pathogens are microorganisms which cause harm. That's what pathogen means. That's what pathogen means. Generates, pathos, harm. So they just mean harm generating. And there are examples of pathogens in lots of kingdoms. Fungi, Protoctists, bacteria, and viruses. Protoctists, we learned about Plasmodium, the one that causes malaria. Bacteria, we looked at pneumococcus, the one that causes pneumonia. You can think of others as well. Viruses, HIV, flu, those are pathogens. Chickenpox, another one. And fungi, how about a really smelly one? Athlete's foot. That's caused by a fungus which just sits between your toes and digests your dead toe skin, making that horrible cheesy smell. So how are living things then put together? Well, we'll start at the level of the very smallest. Organelles. Organelles are those little organs within a cell. So we've seen chloroplasts, those are the organelles within plant cells which contain chlorophyll and do their photosynthesis. And nucleus, nuclei are examples of organelles, an organ within a cell. Cells in turn are made out of organelles, and we've got examples of nerve cells, red blood cells, and those are all cells. Great, hooray. Tissues. Tissues are a collection of similar cells. So muscle tissue made out of muscle cells. Nervous tissue made out of nerve cells. Not that difficult, is it? Organs are collections of tissues. So a heart is an organ because it's made out of different tissues. It's made out of muscle tissue, yes, but it's also made out of nervous tissue. Lungs. Lungs are made out of, sort of lung tissue, really, alveoli and so on, but also made out of tissue that's going to make up blood vessels, because blood vessels go through the lungs. Then organ systems. Organ systems are collections of organs, such as the circulatory system, nervous system, skeletal system, digestive system. Think of other systems. And I remember these as octoos. Octoos. O-C-T-O-O-S. Organelles, cells, tissues, organs, organ systems. Functions of organelles. So we've talked about a lot of these already. The nucleus, what's its function? It stores the DNA, held as chromosomes. Chromosomes are big packages of DNA, or indeed little packages of DNA. And they're the control and information center of the cell. Cell membrane controls what goes in and out of the cell. That's very important. You've got to be able to control the gates. You don't want to let anything into your cell, nor do you want to let important things escape. Cytoplasm, where the chemical reactions in the cell take place, including respiration. Cell wall. It gives structure and rigidity to the cell. and allows the vacuole to expand, fill up with water, giving turgor pressure. Just a word about respiration. Now, aerobic respiration does take place in the cytoplasm. Well, sort of. There is actually an extra organelle, which I haven't told you about here, called the mitochondrion. And mitochondria are the sites of aerobic respiration, whereas anaerobic respiration happens in the cytoplasm itself. The vacuole, well, that stores the cell sap, that's a sugary, salty solution, and when it's full, it presses outwards, giving that turgor pressure that we just discussed, wouldn't you know? And chloroplast, that is where photosynthesis occurs, contains chlorophyll, that gives sugars to plant nutrition. In plant cells, well, have a look. What do you reckon? Which ones of these are in a plant cell? Are you ready? Have you made a decision? Ready? You sure? Here we go. They're all in plant cells. Now, what about animal cells? Have a look. Quickly think which ones are not in animal cells. Which ones are not? Why don't you jot down a little piece of paper? Pause. Pause the video. Go on. Pause it. Okay, here we go. Did you get the answer right? No cell wall, no vacuole, no large vacuole, and no chloroplasts. So on to the tutorial questions. Well, what you might do here is pause, re-watch this video, or go and grab your notes, go and grab a piece of paper and a pen. You should have had that already, of course, making notes. But here we go with the tutorial questions. And what I suggest you do is pause on the questions, keep them up on the screen, and then have a crack at answering them. Here we go. How would you explain the difference between bacteria and viruses? A cell has a nucleus but no cell wall. Why does this tell you that it doesn't have plasmids? What is the H of Mrs. H. Gren, and what does that word mean? So have a crack at those questions now.